As you just saw, the DNC has an entirely different look and feel compared to those from years past. I'd like to bring in President Obama's former economic advisor, Professor Austan Goolsbee, good friend of mine also. Thank you for joining us, Austan. Boy, this year, this virtual convention, first of all, it's a little boring, and the numbers are showing that rating. You know, the ratings were down, and it'll happen on the Republican side as well. But here's my question. You know, I'm watching AOC second a motion to nominate Senator Bernie Sanders, not the next president of the United States, Joe Biden, necessarily. Do you think the Democrats have enough going for them to get that oomph that they need to take down a seated incumbent? As Professor, you know how hard it is to do that.
Yeah, look, I think they do. I hope they do. You know, I'm a Democrat. I think the economy's in a tough spot. There's 170,000 people dead from the virus, and those are both facts that are kind of hard to avoid. I do think it's still an uphill battle. Anybody who thinks that Joe Biden is running away with it, I think has not been paying enough attention to how close our elections have been the last several times. So I guess my short answer is we're still an incomplete. You know, the final is not till November, so we won't know what the final grade is, but I felt pretty good about it.
You know, in Austan, where is the party? Here's the question. You watch this and you see it feels like there's a faction of Bernie Sanders supporters and Biden supporters. It's not united, Austan. That's a very, very important factor that will go into November. If you're a staunch Bernie, kind of further left, socialist type Democrat, you're going to come out and vote for Joe Biden?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, you saw Bernie Sanders himself get up and have a really full-throated defense and say that, look, there's different policy issues I disagree with Joe Biden on, but we are 100% united and we've got to get President Trump out of there. I think there's a unifying factor, which is a dislike of President Trump among the Democrats. And I will remind you, and we talked about in 2016, this was true for the Republicans. There were a lot of divisions, and President Trump, as a candidate, had said a lot of insulting things against his opponents. They all fell into line when it came to November. So I don't think it's unusual that you have some diversity of viewpoints, especially in a party as big tent as the Democrats.
You know, Austan, is it concerning that the week of the announcement of Kamala Harris being the vice president nominee, the pick by Joe Biden, that Trump closed the 14-point gap down to 4, crushed it by 10 points on a CNN poll? What does that tell you? Read the tea leaves, Professor. Let's do the math.
Well, I would, but I do the math, which is take an average. Don't just cherry pick the one poll that agrees with what you wanted it to be. And the average polls, the gap was about 8 points, and it went up to about 8.3. So I take from that's within the margin of error. Pretty much nothing's happened yet. I think most people don't pay real close attention until after Labor Day, which is coming up. But I think anybody who's old enough to remember Mike Dukakis being ahead by 17 points in the polls after the convention ought to be sobered concluding anything about the race before the race is really in order.
As a Democrat, are you concerned? I mean, you've seen Joe Biden make gaffe after gaffe after gaffe when he's on a stage, even from his basement. He's making gaffes left and right. Are you concerned about Biden versus Trump on a debate stage?
Not really. Look, Joe Biden does tend to say funny things and stick his foot in it sometimes. He's always had that. I think everybody knows Joe Biden. They know he's a decent guy. They know sometimes he gets his words mixed up and says them in a bad way. I'm far more disturbed by the things that the President of the United States is saying and doing on purpose, undermining the republic and undermining democracy, than I am about the fact that Joe Biden made a flub in something that he said.
Okay, my friend. Let's also keep it real here. Biden has offended blacks. He's offended blacks, offended Latinos. Some of the comments he's made. What exactly is offensive or undermining that you say President Trump is doing?
Well, I mean, you got to be kidding. So When Joe Biden has offended people, he immediately comes out and apologizes and attempts to not repeat those kinds of things. If we walk through the list of things the president has said that were offensive, not by accident, but on purpose, we could start with what he said about immigrants. We could start with what he said about women. We could look at his actions lately. Now, these things with the post office that my dad in Abilene, Texas is going to have to wait multiple weeks to get his heart medicines through the mail because the president doesn't want people to be able to vote by mail when he himself is voting by mail. I think all of those are dangerous and wrong.
I can't believe we waited till this to talk about the post office. I just want to point something out. I've been doing this for 20 years. The post office has been bankrupt and deficit spending for 20 years. All of a sudden, the post office is a political football. It just blows me away. Austin, I love you. We'll get you back on the show and talk. Let's get you back next week and talk
Anytime,
RNC
man.
stuff next week if we can. Austan Goolsbee, everybody.